Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally tearing down the traditional classroom and looking at what happens when you completely hand over the intellectual reins to your students. We are talking about the Harkness Seminar. And look, I want to hook you right out of the gate here. This is not just a seating arrangement. We're not just pushing some desks into a circle on a Friday afternoon to mix things up. This is a total intellectual revolution in education. It's a complete pedagogical system that shifts the cognitive load entirely from you, the teacher, right onto the students. And just to show you how seriously this idea was taken when it first hit the scene, check out this number: $110 million. That is the 2024 equivalent of the donation that wealthy philanthropist Edward Harkness dropped on Phillips Exeter Academy way back in November 1930. And he didn't give them this massive fortune to build a shiny new football stadium either. He gave it to them with one major string attached. They had to completely dismantle their traditional industrial-era lecture methods. He wanted a real revolution in methods where students actually sat around a table and drove the conversation. So let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with a revolution in methods, clear up the Harkness versus Socratic debate, explore pedagogy made physical, decode the spiderweb map, walk through a step-by-step teacher guide, and wrap up with the deeper pedagogical goals. Okay, Section 1, a revolution in methods. Moving right along to Section 2, Harkness v. Socratic seminars, cousins, not twins. Now, this is probably one of the most common mix-ups in the education world. People constantly use Harkness and Socratic seminar like they're the exact same thing, but they really aren't. The Socratic seminar is fundamentally teacher-guided inquiry. The teacher forms the essential questions, guides the flow, and basically acts as the referee. The architecture of the room is still completely teacher-centered. But the Harkness seminar, it is a student-governed collaborative intellectual exchange. In Harkness, the students initiate the questions. They speak directly to each other, completely bypassing the teacher. They synthesize, challenge, and build collective understanding. So Socratic is about answering the teacher's questions. Harkness is about learning how to talk to each other to actually understand a topic, rather than just trying to win a debate. Let's move to Section 3, pedagogy made physical. The absolute core of this is the oval table. And the classic geometry of this table is exactly 7 feet wide by 11 feet long. That specific size? Totally not an accident. It guarantees that every single seat has a direct sightline to every other seat. There's no back row for a student to hide in. By using an oval, you are structurally removing the front of the classroom. You're collapsing that architectural wall between teacher space and student space. It creates absolute accountability because you can see exactly who is engaged, and it fosters genuine dialogue because you're looking right into the face of the person you're talking to. And that brings us to the second physical element: wall-to-wall whiteboards. Modern Harkness classrooms are absolutely lined with them. Why? Because they make intellectual work visible. Instead of just staring at a teacher transmitting knowledge, the students get up and use the boards to map out arguments, annotate texts, or, if it's a math class, model equations together. The boards become this amazing shared collaborative canvas. Honestly, it transforms the vibe of a high school classroom into something that feels a lot more like a graduate seminar or a design studio. Section 4, the spiderweb map. So you might be wondering, if the teacher isn't lecturing, what on earth are they actually doing? Well, they're mapping. During the discussion, the teacher draws the oval table on a piece of paper and tracks the conversation by drawing a line from the speaker directly to the person they are addressing. By the end of a good class, it looks like this dense, crazy spiderweb of crisscrossing lines. But it's not just lines. Teachers use specific codes to track how students are talking. T means they backed up their point with the text. Q means they asked a genuine question. I, and this one is absolutely huge, means they actively invited a quiet student into the fold. And a plus sign means they built on someone else's idea instead of just pivoting back to whatever they wanted to say. This map gives you real-time data on group dynamics and equity. All right, Section 5, step-by-step teacher guide. Running this kind of discussion is tough, especially when your instinct is to jump in and lecture. So here is your actionable blueprint. Phase 1 is preparation. This is non-negotiable. One unprepared student literally drags the whole table down. They have to come with the text annotated and their own questions ready to go. Phase 2 is the opening. This is where you, the teacher, hand over the keys. You might just sit down and say, "So, where do you guys want to start?" Phase 3 is during the discussion. You map the web and you stay completely quiet. And finally, Phase 4 is closing and debriefing, where the group actually stops to analyze how they performed as a collective. Actually, I want to jump back to phase 3 for a second and just let this sink in. Do not rescue silence. Look, for a teacher, sitting in dead silence while 12 students just stare at you, it's agonizing. It feels like you aren't doing your job. But in Harkness, silence is productive. It's thinking, it's processing, it's intellectual tension. If you panic and fill that silence with a prompting question, you ruin the whole methodology. You're just teaching them that if they hold out long enough, the silence gets them off the hook, and you'll do the heavy lifting for them. You have to let them fill it. And once the dust settles, phase 4, the debrief, is absolutely not optional. This is where students actually learn how to run better discussions. You throw that spiderweb map you've been drawing up on the board and ask, what do you notice? If the lines are all radiating from 2 Harkness warriors who totally dominated the room, well, the geometry doesn't lie. You ask them, who didn't we hear from today, and why? What great ideas got dropped because we moved on too fast? This kind of metacognitive feedback, that's where the real magic happens. Now, keep in mind, Harkness is not some quick technique you just sprinkle into your lesson plan on a random Tuesday. It is a semester-long project of transferring authority. Week 1, you're mostly just modeling norms. Week 2 still requires heavy facilitation from you. By week 3, you'll finally start seeing some real peer-to-peer exchanges. But honestly, that first month is going to feel broken. The maps will be lopsided, the silence will make you sweat, but you have to trust the gradual release process, because right around week 6, something clicks. The students stop looking to you for validation, and they truly take ownership of the flow. Of course, if you want them to perform at this level, you've got to assess it explicitly. Strong Harkness rubrics don't just give a generic grade for participation. They assess real skills, referencing the text, asking genuine questions instead of just rhetorical ones to sound smart, building on a peer's idea, paraphrasing, and changing positions when someone presents good evidence. A lot of teachers even assign a group grade. If the whole table's conversation was completely shallow, everyone's grade reflects that. It creates this intense peer-to-peer accountability where a quiet, disengaged student suddenly becomes the whole group's shared responsibility. Let's wrap up with section 6, the deeper pedagogical goals. Sure, having a brilliant conversation about The Great Gatsby or an elegant math proof is fantastic, but Harkness is really training something much deeper. Here are the 4 true outcomes. First, intellectual courage. I mean, it takes immense bravery to look at your peers and say, I genuinely have no idea, without a teacher swooping in to rescue you. Second, active listening. You're graded on paraphrasing, so you can't just zone out waiting for your turn to talk. You have to actually hear them. Third, self-regulation. The extroverts have to learn when to shut up and yield the floor, which is a massive executive function skill. And fourth, collective accountability. They learn that none of us is as smart as all of us. Traditional lecture-based schooling, it just cannot provide these kinds of outcomes. So I'll leave you with this final kind of provocative thought. As educators, we spend our whole careers learning how to be the master of knowledge in the room. But the ultimate reward of the Harkness method is actually earning your own irrelevance. When you see your students respectfully challenging each other, citing evidence, and building knowledge together without needing you at all, now that is a real revolution in methods. So the question is, are you ready to become irrelevant in your own classroom? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.